really in a really interesting and kind of disturbing way.
And some of the stuff they were saying, Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourself from the bad white people. White people feel frightened of black people every 10 seconds. Whiteness robs you of your brain. The entire system has to burn. This country is not saving. I mean, it was scary to listen to that stuff.
Race, identity, and the weaponization of conversations about racism. Today, we dive into the explosive topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion with none other than Piers Morgan and Matt Walsh. What happens when questioning race-related policies gets you labeled as racist?
It's scary when you think that these people, actually do have power. And the other thing too, the other part of this is that they want to make it so that there's no way out, right? Because they tell you, if you're a white person, they tell you, well, you're racist automatically. And then once they have you, and maybe you say, okay, well, I don't want to be racist anymore, and they give you a whole bunch of things to do, but then at the end of it, they say, oh, well, by the way, you're still racist. You can never not be racist. That's another thing we discovered making the film. When you ask these people, like, at what point can I be not racist anymore? What do I have to do to not be racist? And what they'll tell you is, well, you could be like a little bit less racist, but you can never not be. You're always going to be racist because you're white. And whiteness is inherently racist. That's what they believe. So it's this like hopeless doom spiral that they put you in, and the only way to avoid it is just to ignore these people entirely. Which
I mean, did you work out what DEI really is at its core?
It's terrifying to think these extreme ideas hold real influence. Claims like whiteness robs you of your brain and the system must burn aren't just absurd. They fuel division while offering no solutions. As Matt Walsh points out, it's all about control, creating a cycle where you're the problem and they're the only answer.
It's left-wing racial ideology, and this is its latest manifestation. When DEI goes away, because it's being it has a negative connotation, that term, to most people now, which is good. But the people pushing it aren't going to stop. They're going to repackage it. Left-wing racial ideology, and that is really simple. It really is just the belief that whiteness is inherently evil, inherently racist. It's the cause of all of society's ills, and they're the oppressors. Everyone else is the oppressed, and that's the basic core idea of this thing. And everything just kind of recycles and revolves around that basic core idea.
You interview Wilfred Riley, the author of Hate Crime Hoax. Now, he's an African-American man himself. He says that the epidemic of hate crimes is pretty well made up, and he uses examples of Jesse Smollett, the Covington Catholic school stories, and so on. I mean, the Smollett one to me was a really insidious story, where you have a very famous black American television star inventing a effective lynching or attempted lynching by two people, and it turned out he'd fabricated the entire thing, paid them to do it, to portray himself as a victim of racism.
All right, Matt Walsh drops a bomb here, labeling DEI as nothing more than a repackaged racial ideology for control and cash grabs. Now here's the kicker. Piers brings up Jussie Smollett, and let's just be real. That story still blows my mind. A grown man faking a hate crime, hiring his own attackers, and then crying victim to the world? Come on. What's wild is the damage this does to actual victims of racism.
Exactly, and it as many people point out that, well, if racism is really as prevalent as these people say, then you shouldn't have to go and invent a hate crime. If you're, let's say, a non-white person, and for some reason you want to be the victim of a hate crime, you would think that it'd be very easy to just walk outside and someone will commit a hate crime against you. That's the way they portray it. But turns out that you have to kind of set it up for yourself. And I mean, really, this is why, in my opinion, the whole category of hate crimes legally shouldn't exist. I mean, the things we call hate crimes should be, like, if you beat somebody up, that's a crime. But trying to separate this particular category and treat it as this special thing, I think, is a bit absurd. And it ends up being used in a really arbitrary and ironically, I think, kind of racist and race-biased way.
One of the most ridiculous phrases, I think, of modern times is unconscious bias. And one of the people that spews this a lot is Prince Harry, who obviously married a mixed-race woman, Meghan Markle, but he's always on about unconscious bias. His own royal family members showed unconscious bias. I know these people. They're not remotely racist. They don't think in a racist way. They're not racist consciously or unconsciously. But that's become a real stick now to beat people with. Even when you try your utmost to display to people that obviously you're not remotely racist. You don't judge people adversely because of their skin color, ethnicity, or anything else. That you're still basically guilty. And there's no real way of proving you're not. According to the rules of unconscious bias, because it's unconscious, you're biased.
Matt dives deeper, arguing this isn't about solving racism at all. It's about power and control. The so-called experts sit on their moral high ground while the rest of us tiptoe around their ever-shifting rules.
Exactly, and that's what makes unconscious bias. I think you're right. It makes it so insidious that there's no. It's unfalsifiable because it's unconscious. So if you say, "Well, I'm not biased," they say, "Well, exactly, it's unconscious," and then that puts these people in the position where they say, "Well, you don't even know what's happening in your own mind. You're not an authority on your own mind. I'm the authority, and I will tell you what is happening in your mind." And once you give them that power to literally read your mind, then it's like they have everything.
It's completely insane. How have we got to this place?
Piers doesn't hold back, calling the entire concept of unconscious bias completely insane. To him, the idea that someone else can claim authority over your thoughts you're not even aware of, is beyond absurd.
I mean, I think we kind of go into that in the film and explore that in the film. I think it goes back to these grifters. Now, it's not entirely them, but I think you've got people who have discovered a lot of influence and power in keeping the kind of racial strife and division and all of that resentment,
and money.
suspicion, and money. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of money to be made in that. And so they're not going to allow, so they want to keep it there. They're not going to allow people to revert to this state of just kind of, treating race in a sort of casual way where it isn't very loaded to them. They don't want to allow that because that means less money and less power for them.
I also think this whole thing of microaggressions that you talk about in the film is really interesting because so many people are aware that they've got to be more careful perhaps in the way they talk and so on and so on. And they try really hard. I'm talking about older generation people perhaps who never had to give this much thought. And they're really keen to try and say the right thing. And these microaggressions, where are you from? Where were you born? Do you speak good English? This was the University of Minnesota. These are all deemed microaggressions. You're Asian, how come you're not good at maths? University of Edinburgh. I don't see colour. National Education Association, because apparently denies a person's of colour's racial, ethnic experiences. I mean, it's all just garbage. Unless it's intended in a derogatory way or a sneering manner, none of those things are aggressive.
And here's the thing. This whole conversation shines a light on the messy reality of how we talk about racism today. It's become less about solving real issues and more about power plays and guilt trips. Sure, racism exists, and we need to call it out where it does real harm. But this endless cycle of labeling, shaming, and rebranding everything as bias...
They're just questions people would ask. I mean, the whole royal family row, for example, about the potential skin colour of Prince Harry's son, Archie, was apparently based around one of the members of the royal family saying, given Meghan Markle's parents, one's white, one's black, what skin colour could the baby be? That's not a microaggression. It's not an aggression of any kind. Unless the question was delivered, I hope it's not going to be too dark. That's a microaggression. That's racism. But to simply say, by the way, given the parents are different colours, what colour might the baby... What's wrong with that? Why wouldn't every family in that position ask that question?
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into today's most controversial conversations. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss a single upload. And hey, let me know what you think in the comments.